Good evening from our studios here in New York. A very warm and beautiful evening in New York. I'm sure in Guyana also. It is a very beautiful day. I want to welcome you all to this, our program. We are off for a couple of days. I know Dr. Mahadio had some programs on and then we had a little lull, but we're back on again. I want to welcome you, our viewers in Guyana especially, and those around the world here in North America. Welcome to our program. We want to give thanks to Mr. Nohar Singh, the owner of this GlobeSpan 24/7, and to Devin Bisu for being our technical specialist to carry us through this program. Guyana is a problem area. Everything seems to be going down and down and down as if we never meet the end of that precipice that we're in. We are caught up in a situation that is being created by the politicians, and the politicians don't seem to have an answer to the problem. Every day as we look in the events that's happening in Guyana, we realize that the people, our people, a handful of people, 780,000 Guyanese, don't seem to be able to work ourselves together for the common good. We have seen over the years, from 1997, it has become very clear that Guyanese of African descent do not want to be governed, by and large, by Guyanese of Indian descent. And Guyanese of Indian descent also do not want to be governed by Guyanese of African descent. We have had with us the Burnham Constitution that has created this issue, this problem, and has actually cemented the problem. So what we're seeing playing out today in the streets of Guyana and what is going on there is nothing new. It's just that we are seeing the reality of the situation. The question is, what has happened with the two major groups? What has happened to our people? We have had successive governments since 1992 after the free and fair elections. And before that, there was rigged elections, by and large by the PNC. What we have not learned is that after free and fair elections came into being, we could not govern ourselves or transform our country
Can you hear me?
into one that can be governed
Oh,
for the benefit of all.
okay.
There is no innocent group in this equation. All of us are guilty of creating this environment that we are in today. So when we see display in our country, a few people that support the present government and the way that they are carrying on themselves, it's nothing new. We have seen that from both sides of the political spectrum. And how do we get out of this? Before the program, we were discussing with one of our guests tonight, and the question came up, is representative politics the answer to our question? Is representative politics the answer to the problems in Guyana? We have seen that all over the Caribbean, and we can go back in history and realize that when proportional representation came into being in 1964 elections, those elections, again, that was the last fair election until 1992. Cherry Jagan then thoroughly opposed PR, even though as premier he signed for that to happen. Over the years, from 1992 to 2015, the PPP controlled the corridors of power in Guyana. Yet, through all those years, they did not see the wisdom of creating a new political culture so that all Guyanese are represented, whether in parliament or in government or whatever form it takes. It was everything as was normal status quo. The thing about Guyana is that we do not, and we have not had great leaders. We have had leaders who are just following the norm and not creating anything that is of substance to Guyanese. There were a few exceptions. I think it wasn't proven, but with the arrival of Dr. Walter Rodney, that created a new movement that encapsulated the entire society, that everyone was excited about it. Sadly, we do not know the fruit of that because Dr. Rodney died. So today we are at a crossroad again. And tonight, to help us through our discussion, are three important persons in the body politics of Guyana. We had Salim Nasruddin, who this is his second campaign. He's actually he is the manager of. In 2011, he was the campaign manager for the Alliance for Change, and with his hard work and with the support of the Guyanese people, and the AFC secured a number of seats. This year, he was called upon by Mr. Badal to be his manager for that party, and Salim will tell us some of the things that happened in these elections. Also, we have with us Mr. Ossie Rogers. He's a radio personality. One, I've watched him, I've listened to him, and I think he's one of those voices in Guyana that would like to see us moving forward. Will that voice be, will it disappear? Will it fall on rocky soil, as the Bible says, and does not bring forth fruit? Or will it fall on good grounds? So we are hoping tonight that Mr. Rogers' word will indeed bring good tidings to the people of Guyana. And also we have with us no other than Dr. Beto Ramarak. He's a political scientist, and he has been an integral part of Guyana politics. He wrote many books, most specifically on the contribution of the East Indian community to the development of Guyana. So gentlemen, welcome to our program tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, so we can start with Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, you are new in the program, and welcome.
Thank you.
What do you have to tell us of what's going on in Guyana, and what you think, again, tonight we'll discuss some of the solutions, hopefully. What caused what is happening now, and what might be some of the ways we can get out of it?
Well, I'm not new to the program. We're just meeting up on this program for the first time.
Okay.
But I think that we actually met on another program, but that's for another time. But yes. So what is happening in our politics today? And forgive me because my response will be a little bit biased because of my my association with the People's Progressive Party, and it might come across as a bit biased. But what we have playing out in Guyana today is a situation where we have one political party that has always been accused of being a bully, being people who cannot play by the rules, people who cannot play fair. And we had an election. It was, the elections was, a lot of observers and people said that this election was a fair election up until we had the tabulation of the results. And that's where we are right now. And it points right back to that political party that lacked the ability to play fair, to be honest, to be decent, and to respect the will of the Guyanese people. Nothing has changed from that political party, namely the People's National Congress, since its formation in the 70s.
Thank you. We'll continue our discussion. Salim, you're in Guyana for the elections. Give us an idea of what actually transpired. But I know, as Mr. Rogers just said, Everyone, the international community, the Guyanese community, everyone said election day was the best they've ever seen. The election was almost spotless. It was well executed. The problem started after Region 4 fiasco.
Yeah, well, again, Charles and other guests, good night again, and wonderful Friday night to everyone who's listening in tonight. We are all at the edge, and I think by and large, Change Guyana, for which I was campaign manager, and by the way, I'm not representing Change Guyana on this panel. I'm representing myself as an independent analyst of Guyana's politics and campaign politics specifically. I have, as you mentioned, I've managed multiple, more than two political campaigns in Guyana, and the trends are pretty much the same. And I think Change Guyana, of which I was, integral part of the campaign itself, and developing the messaging and the key issues that needs to be rolled out to the Guyanese public. I think all the other smart parties were also saying the same thing, that we are heading. We saw this happening. When you have two very large ethnic-based parties campaigning and pouring billions of Guyanese dollars into their campaigns, building huge expectations for their supporters. Neither of them were playing to lose. Neither of them. The PPP, put whatever it had to put out there to win the election, and that's what the game is all about. But again, they and I know Betaram might have spoken about this before. But if the game is unfair, I think the outcome will be unfair. And the rules of the game, sorry, not the game, the rules of the game. And Guyana's problem primarily is that it forces Indians to vote for a party they see as their party, and of course APNU, Afro-Guyanese see themselves only voting for APNU, and that's exactly what happened. 98%, 99% of Guyanese went out there and vote solidly along ethnic lines. And basically, when you ethnic voting really has, again, sadly, took us back another 50, 60 years in Guyana today. We warned voters that ethnic voting bring bad leaders, bad policies, and a bad country. And here we are in a bad country, broken country, So unless and until Guyanese voters, and I think we can't blame APNU, we can't blame PPP, we can't blame GECOM. We've got to give some blame to the voters. We voted for these huge parties, and we just allow them to do whatever they want to do. Now, as we all know, GECOM is supposedly an independent agency that manages our election. I feel personally, working with them throughout the campaign and on election day and after election day, I feel they're grossly incompetent as an agency that can manage something that is supposed to be equal for all. It's not that, and I don't think it's only this year. I think GECOM has been a tool for whatever party has been in power from the beginning of GECOM. So I'm not surprised we're here today. I'm not surprised at the behavior of GECOM. I'm not surprised at APNU not giving in and PPP being relentless in its pursuit for the presidency. What I'm saddened about is that we keep tripping ourselves on the same hurdle every single 5 years. And sadly, our leaders might be doing all the wrong things to keep us in a direction but worse and even more sad is our voting population has reneged on their duty to ensure that they vote for parties that understand deeper development for Guyana, and not just keep me in and keep you out. And I guess we'll talk more about
thank
what
you,
are some
Salim. Yeah,
what
I
are some
think
options that Guyana needs to look at moving forward.
yeah, what you said there make a lot of sense because I know before the election we had critics on this program, and the Guyana critics said that in his Facebook page, 1/3 of Guyanese indicate that they will vote for a third party. That did not happen. Dr. Ramarak, what is your take of what's going on now in Guyana?
Well, good night to all of your viewers out there, Charles. Um, I think what the two members have said before. Salim just coming back from Guyana, and Mr. Rogers. They've given a pretty good synopsis of what's going on. I do have a slightly different take, and I think it makes sense to focus on where we are going from here. But what we are seeing in Guyana, and what's being played out today is not something that should be a surprise to anyone. I mean, we have written about this, and our work is in the public domain. We've talked about what needs to be done. We have focused on solutions. And I do want to caution people when they say, well, if Indians are voting for the PPP and Africans are voting for the PNC or the coalition, you can't necessarily blame voters for the way they vote, right? People are rational voters, and they make a rational choice when they put that X on the ballot box. But that creates a problem, which we know. So it is incumbent upon politicians to solve this problem and to get us out of this mess. But when I say I have a different take on this is what I'm saying. I think we should have seen this coming because we had 28 years of dictatorship, and then we had 23 years of one political party that dominated politics, and then we had a change in 2015. So my point is, changes should have come during that 23 years if it didn't come during the 28 years. Because you expect if a government is in power for so long, they have to put things in place. So here is a tragic situation in Guyana today. I have said this before on the night of the election, that this government does not have any intention of playing a fair game, as Salim was saying. They have changed the rules in the middle of the game, and they do not, and I am convinced that they are not willing to give up any kind of power to the PPP. Assuming the PPP won the election and the other small parties, right? They are intent on staying there given the shenanigans. And what to me is so blatant about what happened when the tabulations were taking place is that we've had situations in the past where you can go back and look at clips where Forbes Barnum and Desmond Hoyt have both tried to keep observers out of Guyana. But here we have a situation where observers were invited, they were accredited, and they were allowed to observe the election. But in the middle of the counting, you have a blatant and a very outright public attempt to steal an election. So this is something that's new. So the question is, why are people so adamant? Again, I'm saying it's not a surprise. So we need to focus on changes, but those changes have to come from the institutions, from the political leaders who are running the show. And one of the point I'm trying to make here is that for 23 years, the PPP did not make institutional change that would have created some kind of level playing field, that would have maybe taken away some of the tensions that we're seeing here. And by that, I'm talking about changing some of the institutions of power, for instance, the police force, the bureaucracy, and so on. Because what Mr. Granger has done, and he has done this very deliberately, because their calculation is that they're not leaving office in 2020. When Mr. Granger was in Atlanta in Georgia, he was speaking to PNC supporters. He made it clear that he's going to pursue and fulfill the legacy of his mentor, Mr. Barnum. Mr. Granger has 3 memorials dedicated to Mr. Barnum in his house. And of course, he has selected key members from the military and given them key positions within the government. So he has created a plan, he has created a scenario where in their worldview, whatever happened in the next few days, this government is not willing to relinquish power. The PPP can do everything they want. They can go to the legal route. They can do peaceful protests. But if you're so blatant to try to steal the vote in the middle of the entire world looking at this, it means that you're saying, I'm here to stay, come what may. And I think we're at an impasse. And I think this should have been something that the PPP should have seen coming for 23 years, but they have also, in a sense, and I'm not allocating blame primarily on the coalition. I'm saying that the prior government should have taken steps to create institutions and set things in place. And one of
and one of those steps should have been looking at GECOM.
Yeah, we'll get into details of that. We'll get into details, guys. We'll get into details of that. But what I want to do now is that what happened today in Guyana is that the Madam Chairman made a decision that the recount of the verification of the statement of polls will begin at 9 o'clock. So we have a clip of Mr. Anil Nandalal when they started that process, and then we'll see what happened after that.
And 2 young ladies were proceeding at breakneck speed. There was a screen there that has a spreadsheet on it, and they were simply calling out numbers at a fast rate of speed that would render it almost impossible for anyone to follow what they were doing. I attempted to intervene. They ignored me. Then Mr. Mingo emerged from I don't know where. He said that he was coming into the room for the first time, but persons who were there said no, he was seated there, and he left and then he came back. Anyhow, he reported, to preempt what I was going to say, he says that he's now there for the first time after coming from the court, and he's going to give instructions now based upon what the Chief Justice said. He then proceeded to say that they are moving to another location, the headquarters of GECOM, where the exercise will be resumed from where it left off, and a projector will be used with scanned documents. Now, the Chief Justice didn't say any of those things. The Chief Justice said, if you want to use the projector, it must be the statement of poll that you must put down and use and project on the screen. Not a scanned statement of poll. The original statement of poll is in the possession of Mr. Mingo. And we know that that location was being prepared for this exercise a long time ago. And then the second important point is that they are not prepared to start the process over in compliance with the Chief Justice order. And a whole set of documents have already been done in breach of the court order. So this whole thing is contrived, and the fraud continues. The fraud continues to what they are perpetuating. So we have to continue the struggle to prevent that from taking place or being concluded.
The instructions come from the Chief Justice chamber this afternoon?
The Chief Justice explained in very clear language on multiple occasions that her order is that the statements of poll must be used as the basis for the adding up and the ascertaining of the votes, to use the language of the law. That the statements of poll either must be put on the screen or must be shown to everyone, and they must be able to observe it. Nothing short of that will suffice. Mr. Boston tried on many occasions to say that you can use a spreadsheet or you can use the information on the statement of poll. The Chief Justice says no, you must use the statement of poll. If you have a problem with the numbers, you can reconcile it at a different stage of the process. But the statement of poll that you're using must be held up and be seen by the parties.
Okay, and he went on to talk about the events of today. And gentlemen, I want to talk about that. The thing is, Dr. Ambarak, you're a professor. Mr. Rogers, you're a broadcaster. Salim, you're an analyst. I teach accounting in college here in the US. And what I find intriguing is that in accounting, there's some accounts that are open that is contra to an existing account. What that means is that in the case of an asset, you're allowed to expense the cost of that asset over its useful life. And to do that, the accounting profession allows us to open an account called accumulated depreciation, which is a contra account to the asset account. The same thing happens in accounting when we close off at the end of the year. We close off our books of accounts, and the temporary accounts are closed off, and we use an account called income summary to close off those temporary accounts. The thing is, I'm saying that to say this, that this spreadsheet they're talking about is nothing fundamentally wrong with a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet, however, is a contra to the statement of polls. If there was no statement of poll, there would be no Excel sheet. So the thing is, the Excel sheet they're talking about is there, but it should reflect what the source document has. And what we are finding in region 4 is that whatever the statement of poll number is not reflected in their spreadsheet. And that is the fundamental problem. They have done it to region 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. All the political parties, all the observers, GECOM, everyone agree that the information from the statement of polls were truly reflected in that spreadsheet they talk about. So the spreadsheet is not the problem. The problem is the spreadsheet is this guy, Mr. Mingo, is like Houdini. He just bring figures out of the air, plug into a spreadsheet, and there is no source document for that. And that's the problem. Mr. Rogers, what is your view on that?
Well, first of all, sir, the law is clear. And I'm no lawyer, but the law is clear. There are certain things that happens in an election, statutory, that no one person cannot just get up and change just like that. The law requires that once they were, let me start. An election is called, the people go to the polls, they vote. After the voting, the counting of the results is done in this way, where the boxes are open in the presence of the contesting parties, agents of the contesting parties, and observers, and people who work with the elections body. The votes are called out, they're held up, and everybody agree. One vote for PPP, one vote for APNU. At the end, everybody agreed that we had 100 votes for I'm just using numbers here. 100 votes for the PPP, 100 votes for APNU, 5 votes for Change Guyana. It's placed on a statement of poll in the presence of everybody, and then that statement of poll becomes a legal document. Copy of that statement of poll is handed out to the party agents, observers if they want to collect it, and then it is posted at the polling place. You cannot now just go use a spreadsheet. What the type of spreadsheet that they wanted to use is when they were calling out, so APNU had a little worksheet. All right, so you tally up the votes on this worksheet. But that is not the official and original document that is supposed to be used. And if you do not use that document, then you are in breach of the law, because the law requires that. It is statutory. No RO can just unilaterally change that. You know what I mean? So it is clear that the shenanigan and the maneuvering was a clear attempt to derail the entire process, to call the process into question, and to give them enough time to adjust the numbers to suit themselves to keep the APNU coalition in government. Because what is written on the statement, the reason they do not want to use the statement of poll is because what is written on the statement of poll, they all see it, they all know, it is not the numbers that they are looking for.
In the spreadsheet.
Absolutely. And you know what?
Yeah.
Charles, there's something in political science we refer to as a political coup. We're seeing this in process here, and I think Mr. Rogers summarizes very well. Section 84 of the People's Representation Act says clearly what has to be done. The statement of polls are the official numbers, and if you notice, I believe the PPP has published their statement of polls, but no one from APNU have actually challenged any of those numbers.
Nor the Elections Commission, nor the Commission.
Exactly. So what we're seeing here is, we can talk about all the legal,
But Dr. Rambarak, sorry to cut in there. It's not a PP statement of polls. It's GECOM statement of poll that is given to the PP polling agent. So it's not a PP document.
That is represented there.
Right, it's not a PP document or an APNU document or a Change Guyana document. It is a GECOM's document.
Absolutely, and if you're using a spreadsheet, then those numbers have to come from the statement of polls. It can't be something that you concoct in a room someplace, in a back room, and come up with your own numbers and then read them off as if they are the official numbers and you are the sole arbiter, determiner who's going to present and create those numbers. That's not the way it works.
Well, Salim, Doc. Salim, the Chief Justice ruled that he must comply with Section 84. And he has flunked that order.
Yeah, I think Mingo knows that rule more than you and the four of us sitting here.
Combined.
I think everybody GECOM knows that rule because that's the rule they're supposed to follow. I think since the no confidence motion in Guyana a year and a few months back, all Guyanese have become lawyers, legal luminaries. I think Aussie, you've just become a lawyer. Don't worry about it because you've just explained the entire laws of Guyana as it relates to the statement of polls and counting and coming to a declaration. But at the end of the day, guys, the law is very clear. But again, when you mix it with high expectation and when you mix it with the current ethnic landscape of Guyana, you will always have an unwillingness as well as a reinterpretation of what's real. I mean, look, we had big men, intelligent men who've spent 30, 40, 50 years studying law, arguing about 35 and 30, 33 and 34, which is more, or which is the majority. Today we have big men and big women arguing whether we should use a statement of polls or we should just go into a room and make up some numbers. I mean, it's ludicrous what Guyana has become, and we have become the laughing stock of almost the entire world. The 5 Caribbean leaders had to come to Guyana to tell us, "Hey guys, behave. You're making me look bad." Then you got Americans and you got Canadians and you got OAS and you've got so many people who are looking at. I was in Guyana, and these observers were looking at each other like, are these people civilized? I mean, what am I doing in Guyana here with these people? Do they understand that there's certain procedures? So I think Guyana itself and sadly our leaders have put us where we are today. My biggest thing is that what we've lost more than anything else, whichever party loses or whichever wins, what we've lost in Guyana fundamentally is trust. National trust for our agencies. There's no trust in GECOM anymore moving forward. The only thing you can do with GECOM is to bury and let it rest for a while and rebuild a new agency that can run elections credibly and remove politicians from GECOM, remove APNU from GECOM, and remove PPP from GECOM. There's no need for those guys to be in there if it's going to be independent. And I think trust not only in the agencies of Guyana, but sadly, trust between our people. People are now looking at each other in funny ways. People are afraid to do certain things. People are going to be afraid to express their democracy. So I think trust has been really taken a beating in Guyana over the last 2 to 3 weeks. And sadly, the agency that was crafted to bring trust to the system is causing the mistrust and distrust and division among
Yeah.
Guyanese.
And what you have
Yeah,
said
but
there,
Salim, that's
sorry,
because that
sorry,
agency
Doc,
has been
Doc,
co-opted
sorry.
by the
What
ruling
Salim
government.
just said there, segue into our next video where after GECOM started their Kong, then they moved the Kong to the back of the Ashman building, that open place. And there was a Mr. Jonathan from Anog was objecting vigorously to what Mr. Mingo was doing. And we have a video of what happened during that time. Let's play it. We're waiting on the video. And this was the APNU representative at GECOM. And we were told from Mr. Nascimento, who was also there, is that when she walked in this morning, she made a ruling and Mr. Mingo followed her ruling to the T. So this thing was a really cooked up arrangement. This was already pre-planned, and Mr. Mingo had no, he didn't want to change whatever the plan was. You know, he wanted to go ahead with that spreadsheet, and this is what happened when we don't trust each other.
Professor.
My first reaction to that video is look at the condition of that environment. It looks like some kind of warehouse or some kind of cow pen kind of arrangement. I mean, this is national election. $17 billion was spent by GECOM, and we're flippantly, showing results and going through papers in some kind of backyard of a warehouse. This is very sickening that GECOM has.
You know what should be clear to all Guyanese is that the rigging was planned to be taking place in region.
that area.
That was the plan. And I think this is where they will struggle it out. And you know, Charles, all the videos we will see about opposition members challenging, A, B, C, D, E, and F, and so on, that will continue. But I think once that decision is made, once that announcement is made, I think what will happen is they will try to swear in Mr. Granger. And once that's done, I've said this before on the show, he will move to create maybe a state of national emergency to control and promote law and order. And I think the protests, assuming if people are considering protests at that point, those things will be put to rest. But I think the legal challenge, and we will see all of these videos tomorrow, the next day, it will be there because the legal challenges will continue. But you're dealing with a cabal right now that does not care. And GECOM, we have to also remember, GECOM seems to be an arm of the coalition at this point.
And I want to add, Professor. First, I want to say something to Salim. Salim, the PPP in 2015 had an expectation to win just like they have in 2020. However, when the declaration was made and the results was not in the favor of the PPP accepted, went to the court and challenged on via an elections petition and allowed that process to work its way through the court. No one tried to stop Granger from being sworn in or anything. Because what you said earlier, Salim, I was taken back by that. Because you're trying to make it look as though because there was an expectation by the PPP to win and an expectation by the APNU coalition to win, the PPP is behaving this way because they didn't win, and that is far from the truth. I don't know if that was your intention or that's what you meant to come across. But
no, I'm not saying PPP is behaving a certain way. I'm saying both parties are behaving in a certain way to ensure that they can deliver to their voters the expectation that they've built up. But it's a dangerous precedent when
the PPP was not able to deliver the expectation that was built up in 2015. Yet still, the leaders acted maturely and put Guyana first. Yeah. And accepted the results and allow Guyana to continue.
Honestly, I totally agree with you. What is absent since election day to now has been the APNU's voice. We haven't heard from the president in any substantial way. We haven't heard from any APNU leaders in any substantial way. We haven't heard even from GECOM, and you claim that they're like a surrogate now of APNU. But we haven't heard from these guys, and these guys are big players. The narrative right now on the ground, whether right or wrong, is the PPP narrative of APNU cooking up this entire thing with spreadsheets and so on. So
and you know what? Thinking outside the box, and again, I'm not defending the PPP here, right? So let's assume that the PPP, if the results show that the PPP won, and you have a transition, you know, from the coalition to the PPP, it means that there's something called institutional memory, right? So we've changed a government in 2015, and again, assuming PPP won in 2020, we are now having another transition. And if another government wins in 2025, it means that there's some semblance of democracy at work here. But when you have an impasse like this, and you can't even produce the actual results, then you have a seriously divided society.
Professor, I want to say one other thing. What we saw on that video earlier is nothing new. I have been the recipient of some of those shoves and pushes from PNC PNC people. However, the only thing that is new here is that everyone has a cell phone and everyone is
absolutely. Thank God for cell phones.
All right. What we saw happen in Monrepo, this will be my final point, and what we saw happen in Monrepo, where people from Bethelvewacton went over and stood around the polling place and tried to intimidate Indian voters from going to the polling place, is nothing new. The only thing that is new now is because it was recorded and captured on cell phone.
And you see, Mr. Rogers, Mr. Rogers, you make a very valid point there, in that in 2015, the PPP accepted the result and they went into opposition with the expectation that APNU will also follow the rule of law. And if they win the election, they will be re-elected. If they lose the election, they will walk. The thing is, the expectation of APNU we have seen since the time when the president appointed Mr. Patterson, Justice Patterson. That tells you he wasn't following the law, because what the opposition leader did, he submitted one list, it was rejected, two lists, it was rejected, three lists, it rejected, and then the president unilaterally appointed a chairman. It had to be, again, as Salim said, the observer think we are a pack of fools. We had to go to CARICOM, to the CCJ, to make a decision, say that what the president did was unconstitutional. We have seen the expectation that the PPP had. They expect that APNU will respond in like mind. And APNU is saying, no, this is not the same game we are playing.
From what Ozzy said, Charles, and I totally agree with him that PPP did exit, gracefully and allowed the APNU and coalition to take leadership. But bear in mind that PPP fully understood that it would have been a tough election to win, given their record. And speaking to the hierarchy of PPP, they would have known that certain basic party as well as campaigning functionality was just not there. They were underperforming. You had Ramotar, who was probably one of the worst presidents, and
there's nothing worse than
candidate. It was a weak candidate. So PPP knew.
All
right, Mr. Rogers,
they were probably going to lose the election. Now, coming back to 2020, APNU also, and I think they're fully well aware that they were grossly underperforming for the past 5 years. They knew that this would have been a very, very difficult election to win. It could have been easy for them if they just had done, some of their promises, but they've done literally nothing. They've destroyed the economy. They've raised taxes. They've made living even tougher in Guyana. So it would have been a tough one for them to win. Now, knowing the nature of APNU and their base, they're not going to go down as easily as that. They would not factor in the reality that people may not vote for them. So they're going to look for a plan B. And I think this is what is playing out in Guyana right now. There's a plan B by APNU that says, hey guys, the numbers are not looking too great. We got to figure out an approach. And I think by and large, that's what we are experiencing today, sadly, and it continues to erode trust, erodes democracy, and so much more. And I think, what would it take for this president that campaigned on honesty, that campaigned on decency, to say, hey, GECOM, do the right thing, follow the law, call the shots, and let's see where the chips fall.
I think the pressure will.
The president will not even do that.
No, I think the international pressure, we'll come to that in a minute. But gentlemen, at 8 o'clock, we're having Dr. Frank Anthony will join us via telephone. But I want to throw this corkball to you guys. Isn't what is happening now, we can put it square at the lap of the PPP? Had Steve Surjbali was still the chairman of GECOM, Lowenfield would have been the CEO, and we would have a better election in terms of what's happening now. This would not have happened if Steve Surjbali was there.
I would want to believe, sir, from the time the coalition got into power, the coalition knew that they were on shaky grounds, because if you look at the results from 2015, even though Salim said all this baggage that the PPP took into the 2015 elections, and the PPP was underperforming, there was still a very small win by a coalition of all the opposition forces against the one PPP. So that when the coalition went into power, the coalition knew very well that they were on shaky grounds, and they start to put things in place to ensure that GECOM will be an arm of Congress place and a tool to assist them to stay in power illegally.
Mr. Rogers, if you don't mind, sir. It was the PPP who pressured Surjbali to step down. Then the president started doing this nonsense. No, can we listen to this tape? Okay, can we listen to this tape from Mr. Alexander? He's on right now.
Books of 4. One would have written on the first copy, and that would have printed through to the remaining 3 copies. I don't know if we can call those photocopies in this sense, because it is those which were distributed.
Have you actually seen the displays?
On the screen? Yes.
Are they clear?
To me, they could be clearer. But that's a question of technology.
Do they appear all through the menu?
Huh? No. Menu set could be clearer. I'm not seeing alterations. What I'm seeing, it's not the clearest of images. It's a question of technology.
Has any representation been made to have clearer?
Since I have been there, I've got the representation.
How would you describe the process? I mean, there's a lot of shadow of doubt has been casted on the process for Region 4 itself, and whether or not it's being done in a credible manner. How would you describe the process?
I took the time off to read what the Chief Justice said. As I said yesterday, there could be 101 interpretations of what she said. So in the first instance, one has to accept that she placed the authority in the hands of the returning officer. And you couldn't really open the process to everybody saying what they thought she said. That's one. Secondly, my understanding of what she said, I have seen no violation of the process. Because as I understand it, there is an obligation to do a tabulation in the view of the persons who are entitled to be there, and the extent to which one throws up a screen and the numbers are put up there, at the end, the summation represents that tabulation.
Mr. Alexander, how do you respond to claims that the figures that are being displayed on the screen really represent an increase in numbers?
I would not respond to those. They are entitled to make that claim, and there's a process for the determination as to whether the claim is right or not.
Are the SOP security features being aptly displayed on the screen?
The SOP security features are not security features visible with the naked eye.
But one of the contentions is that the way the process has been done, that the people who are eligible to be there cannot actually verified authenticity.
But this is not a verification exercise.
By using a special light, I believe.
This is not a verification exercise. This is an exercise in which the RO is ostensibly to present to them, from his statement of polls, the figures which he or she has. If they do not agree, there's a process and a time at which they can raise that matter. So it's in a...
I think Mr. Alexander was a bit ingenious there. He was talking about the Chief Justice giving what Mr. Mingo is doing, that the Chief Justice actually said that. I think she said completely opposite. She said, yes, he can make the rule, but he got to follow the law. And the law is 84.1 says, in the present, use the statement of polls. And if you want to make a spreadsheet, that's okay. But the statement of polls is the source document. So Mr. Alexander, I thought he was a very intelligent guy, but very ingenious there. Disingenuous. Dr. Amarak?
Well, you're dealing with people, as Salam said earlier, these are people who are partisan. Mr. Rogers says it's a GECOM is an arm of the coalition. It actually is. And you mentioned, what happened and how Mr. Granger got Mr. Patterson in there. You may also recall that the rigging process started, with that process and even before that. So you had a situation where I believe I did interview Vinson Alexander and Robeson Ben on this show, and they both agreed that GECOM was a dysfunctional organization for primarily the reasons we said before. But you may also recall that what Patterson did was one of the professional who actually worked for GECOM was a guy named Vishnu Prasad, who had actually scored very high and who was a preferred candidate. But according to Mr. Patterson, he said that Mr. Vishnu Prasad is shifty. I think that's the word he used, and he claimed that he would produce evidence on him that will show that he's a person of bad character. That never came. You may also recall that the PPP had accused GECOM of not having a balanced, manpower of people working for GECOM. So, the jig was in, Charles, and so it's the institution, but it's the people who facilitated that. And what we're seeing here is nothing different, from what I guess I'm older than most of you here, but there's nothing really different from what we've gone through, struggling against the Bordermite, era. So
Dr.
So we've
Amarak,
seen institutions.
Dr.
Yes,
Amarak,
sir.
we have Dr. Frank Anthony on the line with us. He will give us a feedback on what's going on. Dr. Frank Anthony, this is Charles Sugam. You're GECOM, right?
Yes, I'm outside at the High Street office.
Oh, not the Ashman building.
We were not allowed to go into the building. So they're only allowing one person per party. So we have a representative who is inside, but on the outside, we're standing on the outside, and what has happened is that the police has allowed an influx of APNU supporters. So you literally have maybe about 30 or so APNU supporters that are very boisterous, and we are on the other side of the road.
That's in High Street.
Police, of course, that's in High Street. And the police, of course, are not doing anything. It looks like they're trying to engineer a confrontation. And of course, the APNU AFC crowd is very abusive and boisterous. So we'll see what happens. We are here very peacefully, and we'd like to see the completion of the process of verifying. My understanding is that... Hello?
Yes, go on. We're hearing you.
Yeah, my understanding is that the regional count has been made. There are about 89 or so SOPs to the regional count to be completed. GECOM took a pause, so we are waiting them to restart that process, and hopefully they'll complete that regional count. After which, after the completion of the count, we understand that the RO would make a declaration. But what is important to point out to your listeners is that the CJ ruled yesterday on a methodology that should be used in the recounting or in the verification process. And that is the original statement of poll must be presented to the people who are doing the counting, and so that must be projected up and against the wall, and people can then use their original statement, the ones that they have in their possession, to see whether it matches with what was put up on the wall. Unfortunately, for most of the day, almost 400 and something statements, the poll GECOM just went through them quite quickly with almost zero verification, which prompted the international observers and some local observers and the PPP to walk out of the process, because at that point, we weren't even allowed to ask a question. We couldn't object to any of the, erroneous things that were being put up. And so,
So, Dr. Frank, Dr. Frank, this is Salam here. I just want to ask you a quick question. When the GECOM were reading the SOPs and in public and in full view, I guess now, were there any discrepancies with the SOPs?
There were many discrepancies because most of the SOPs were not matching. And the trend that we noticed was that there was an increase for the afternoon, and they couldn't show us with an original SOP how the afternoon numbers went up. And in some instances, they took away votes from the PVP. So what we have is a subtraction of votes from the PVP and addition of votes for the absence. So it's very clear. And when we ask them, well, okay, if that's your number, can you show us an original SOP that reflects those numbers? And of course, they didn't have any SOP that they can produce.
So if your representative there was unable to correct or to address or to question any of what was being
they didn't allow for any of that.
What's the point of the verification?
Well, that's the thing. That's what we are saying, and that's why we went to court. The courts were very clear, saying that they should use the SOPs for that verification. Recall this morning at 10:30, we took Mr. Mingo to contempt of court, and when he went there, the CJ was very explicit that he has to use the statement of poll, project it upward, use some projection so that everyone in the audience can see, what is going on. And, but that didn't happen. And even when the CJ said to them, use the original document, the document for the last 8 to 9 that we are waiting to be verified, both for national and regional, the document that they are projecting, it is not statements of poll. They're not showing us the serial number. They're not showing us, because these statements of poll, they have watermark on them. We cannot verify whether they are authentic. So what they're doing is putting a piece of paper up, projecting it, and then when they do that, we're not sure what we are looking at. And that's something that, we have been objecting to, and the RO would not take our objections. They're just rushing through the process. So the conclusion of everyone who has been in the room is that this here is such a flawed process. So that is what is going on.
Well, what do you think is the plan here? Is it for them to just to come up with a final declaration and then proceed with the
I
swearing?
think what they're trying to do is they're trying to finish Region 4 maybe within the next hour or two. And when they finish Region 4, the RO is going to make a declaration. And then we'll see what happens after that.
But Dr. Anthony,
So,
at the court this morning, the Chief Justice was clear, Madam Chairman was there, the CEO was there, and Mr. Mingo was there. When they left, did they have clear instructions that they're supposed to do what you said?
No, they didn't. And what has happened is that while all of that declaration was made, and they told the Chief Justice that they're going to follow those orders. None of that happened. They came back. They changed the location of the verification process. We moved from Hatfield Street to High Street. And the excuse that was given for that move was that they didn't have a projector at Hatfield Street and that they needed to come to High Street to do the verification process. And so we came at 4 o'clock, and of course, there were lots of difficulties restarting the process. So it's really, what we are witnessing, it's the rigging of an election in front of not just the local community, but the international community as well. And it's protected by the police because you have policemen, literally maybe about 100 policemen surrounding this facility, having barriers and not allowing people to go in to witness any of this. So this whole rigging process is well protected by the police.
But what is the penalty for contempt, Dr. Anthony?
I didn't get that.
What is the penalty for contempt of court?
Well, we'll know soon enough because I think with all that has happened, we'll have to go back and take Mr. Mingo back to court. He went there today, and the Chief Justice was trying to get us to work this thing out. But obviously, what he came back and what he's doing is not following those orders. So we have an extremely flawed process, and one that is designed to increase the votes of the AFNU and to decrease the votes of the PVP. It's as simple as that. And all the observers who have been in the room have been able to witness that. All the political parties have witnessed that. The statements of polls that we have does not correspond with any of the numbers that they have called. And they are not showing us statements of polls that they are using. And we cannot verify whether any of it is authentic.
Dr. Frank, the order that was given by the Chief Justice, whose responsibility it is to enforce? Because if you're saying this guy is in contempt of court, who's the one that was supposed to enforce those orders if he doesn't get it done?
Well, I assume it's GECOM. You have a commission. You have you have a chief elections officer under whose jurisdiction the RO would fall. So you have a number of other people who are supposed to ensure that the court's order is respected. But what we have witnessed, that's not happening. That's not happening.
My understanding is members of the OAS have actually departed. Is that true? And the other
the
observers?
OAS team, they left this morning in disgust. And my understanding as well is that they have made arrangements to leave the country. They probably did that already.
Are there other observers?
However, some of the other observers that was around this afternoon, including the Carter Center, has assured us that they would be here to witness the process to its completion.
Any word from the chairman of GECOM, Dr. Anthony?
The chairman of GECOM, I understand that early in the day when the matter came up in court, that she was in court, but outside of that, it's very difficult to access the chairman. Even sometimes the commissioners themselves are having that difficulty.
Okay, gentlemen. Well, Dr. Frank Anthony, thank you so much for giving us an update. And guys, stay well. And we hope that good sense prevail and Guyana do not go down to this dark hole that we are heading into.
Well, thank you very much for having me on your program. And as you can see, we are in a struggle here for democracy. And we all have to be vigilant because this here is going to take our country back to those dark days. We don't want to go there. I think the international community is standing strong with us. And you would have seen some of the statements that have been released by the U.S. State Department, saying that if this process is illegal, it's not done properly, it's contrary to what the Chief Justice has ordered, then they would not respect whatever declaration comes from it. And they would also not respect the swearing in of the president and things like that. So Guyana can find itself being isolated. So I hope those who have engineered what is going on currently at GECOM, I hope they're paying keen attention because this would have lots of implications to the political leadership of APNU and AFC.
But Dr. Anthony, before you go on, Salim, 1 second, if you don't mind. Before you came on, we were talking about an issue that I raised with the panel, and I want you to answer this question. Shouldn't what is happening now lie at the lap of the PPP? If Dr. Suraj Bali was still there, none of the shenanigans would have happened. So shouldn't the PPP take responsibility for what's happening now?
No, the PPP can't take responsibility for what is happening now. What you have is an elections commission and members of that commission who is not doing their job. And I should remind your audience that some of what we are witnessing today did in fact happen in 2015. So, and I can tell you that when we asked for certain boxes to be recounted, we were denied, and that happened in 2015. So it's some of these persons who are there in GECOM who have been aiding and abetting what is going on today. So we, as Guyanese, we want to have an institution like GECOM to work impartially, to work fairly, to work in the interest of the people of the country, not in the interest of a party. And what we are seeing is partisan action that is taking place, and they're rigging the elections. And this is what we need to expose, the rigging of this election.
Correct. Salim, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question. I know presidential candidate of APNU, David Granger, and Mr. Jagdeo met, I think, 2 nights ago. What came out of that? I know, listening to Granger, he said that it was very productive. I wasn't too sure what productive means. So, from your perspective,
well, I can't answer your question because I don't know. I don't know what happened in that meeting. I can't answer your question.
Gotcha.
Okay, Dr. Anthony, Frank, thank you so much.
All right, thanks for having me.
Dr. Anthony?
Yes?
This is Ozzy. How are you doing? Oh,
hello?
He probably can't
go on,
hear
Ozzy. Ask the question.
Yeah, this is Ozzy. How are you doing? Well, I just wanted to pretty much give you guys a word of encouragement down there. You know, I know of the danger that you guys face, especially when the the other side is out, I don't want to refer to them the way they should be referred to, but when the other side is out, I know that the danger that you guys can face, and I just want to encourage you guys to stay strong and continue fighting for Guyana.
Yeah, we are going to do that, and thank you for the words of encouragement. But I think what we need to do is to have more people involved in this fight, because if we allow this travesty to happen, then all Guyana would be losing. And we have fought too long and hard to have democracy in this country to lose it in this manner. So I hope that we can have all right-minded Guyanese coming together to denounce what is going on. And in fact, we have been getting a lot of encouragement from a lot of people who have been coming out and standing up with us.
Charles, I have a quick question.
But we need to continue that.
Dr. Anthony, you know, one of the discussions that's taking place today is about how the PPP is approaching, the PPP and the other opposition parties. How are they actually approaching this? We know about all the legal challenges that the opposition, including the PPP and the smaller parties, are doing. However, the argument is being made that even though you have outside observers and everyone looking into Guyana and looking at the shenanigans, it is also important to have people express themselves through peaceful protest. So my question is, I know there are some people who are saying, well, you should not have peaceful protests at a time like this. And there are others who will argue that, well, you have to continue with the protests to encourage these observers to continue with the support and the demand for, you know, for a verified verification process that's clean. So my question is, where does the PPP stand on this? Because I have not been seeing any kind of protest in Guyana.
Well, there are many forms of struggle, and protest, getting people on the street and so forth, is one form of struggle. You would have seen that people spontaneously took to the streets in Lusignan,
yes,
and also in West Berbice. In some of these cases, the police reacted very harshly, and they used pellets and rubber bullets and so to clear some of the protesters. In one instance in Cotton Tree, one of the persons who were in a peaceful protest was fatally shot. And in fact, I went up there the day after, and the persons were showing me that where the police was standing was about 20 feet away from this individual, and they shot him at that range, claiming that he was going to chop the policeman. Now, these are things that I think people are looking at. I don't think that the Guyanese people are afraid of protest. And maybe at the right time you'll see people coming out again on the street. So protest is one form of action. But what we are engaged in right now, we have gone through the process of trying to make sure that whatever GECOM is saying, this is how you verify and all of that, we are trying to go through that process. We are trying to make that process work. We are trying to give GECOM an opportunity to do the right thing. Unfortunately, with all that is happening, we are not seeing that. The
Dr.
court
Anthony,
is also an option.
Dr. Anthony, before you go, two things. One is I agree with you that that guy in the Berbice was shot at point blank range. And I think someone should consider taking that to the World Court as a war crime against humanity, because the president is ultimately responsible. The other question I want to ask you is, if you put on a crystal ball, what do you see happening this weekend and next week, if you were to predict what's going to happen?
Well, I don't want to predict anything. What I want to happen is that GECOM respect the laws of this country and do this process properly. And if they do that, well, then we'll have a winner of the elections and we'll have a new government. And that's all we are asking for.
Gentlemen, any more questions for Dr. Anthony?
I'm good.
Well, thank you so much, Doc. And as everyone says, please, guys, stay safe. I understand that you said that the police is protecting the APNU supporters, which is really sad, and they're not protecting the others in the same vein.
Well, they're not. What the police actually did was to allow a set of APNU supporters to come where a few of us were standing, and the people started a big confrontation with us. We're not telling them anything, and the police is just standing idly by, not doing anything. So there you go again. You know, how law and order is being administered in this country.
Just make sure you use your cell phone and document and take as many videos as possible.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you, Dr. Anthony.
Okay, guys, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And gentlemen, it's really sad what is taking place in Guyana. And the sad part of all this is that the president is a historian. He know what happens in the past when these things take place in different countries in the world. He's supposed to be a religious man, and for this to happen, blatantly rigging an election in front of the world, it is really, really a sad day and a dark day for Guyana. And I pray and hope that the president will listen and come to his senses and to declare that, you know what, we have lost the election. If we go back to the statement of polls, it will show what we are. And I listened to the candidate for the PEP last night, and he was fine, but I think he should have been a little more forceful in presenting himself as the president for all of Guyana. You know, he keeps saying that the PEP has won. Yes, we know the PEP has won based on the result that is available out there. So then what after that? The thing is, Mr. Ali needs to present himself, I believe, as a magnanimous figure above all the fray, and to put himself as the president for all of Guyana. So whenever he's sworn in as president, that he will actually go out to every community, reach out to the people, and to show them that he is not the president of the PPP, but he's the president of Guyana. One thing he spoke about last night, gentlemen, is that the golden part of it is the ballot box. And he was saying to count all the ballot boxes back. Is that something we should entertain, or we should do a sample of the ballot boxes, which I think is in line with normal procedure, and to see how those ballot boxes tie in with the statement that Mr. Mingo presented to the public? What do you guys think?
I'm in total agreement of that, and I think that's where I think we can get the truest count of the votes. It's going to be a longer process. Probably going to require more.
Take a sample. Take 5 bucks on East Coast.
At minimum, Region 4 should be recounted. You know, and I know a recount is probably only, according to law, can be done after a declaration, so to speak. You know, so that's a whole different dynamic in terms of the legal issues and so on. But yeah, I feel that not only, and personally, you know, as campaign manager of Change Guyana, I also feel that not only is it that the PPP is being cheated here, but I feel the Change Guyana and other smaller parties might have performed much better. And I'm not too sure what's in those boxes, but I would love to see a recount as to what those numbers really are, especially as it relates to the smaller parties.
Gentlemen, before you make any comment, we have an audio that we want to play for the listening audience.
Nothing can be prospected at some time. I'm just human, like any one of you. So therefore, I am saying here and now, I am continuing from where you are. Whether you have a running total or not, I am continuing, and that's my decision. We need to
just now you start 0. APNU, so 1, so we have 40 or 1 in front of us.
Please, sir, if you don't be quiet, I will have to ask the police.
But you didn't ask that young lady who was really out of order.
You know I was out of order.
Yes, you were.
When you were out of me, I was stamp you in your face.
No, no, no.
So are we having a forced process here? Is this transparency? Is this...
And that's the
Well,
audio.
Guyana-
that's the
Guyana
audio
at its
of
best.
Mr. Mingo, and it seems
That's
to
not
be
Guyana at its
it
best.
seems to be a well coordinated effort with Mingo and maybe Lowingfield and the staff of the commission with APNU, which is really, really sad. GECOM is supposed to be the referee, you know, the independent referee. We're seeing the same thing with Mr. Jonathan there with the APNU lady, and that is uncalled for. He made a statement objecting to what is going on, and she was, you know, pissed off about it, and she wanted to rush after him and fight him. And it's really sad that is what is going on now in Guyana. Mr. Rogers, what do you think?
Professor, this is nothing new. I say it again. The PNC, this is typical PNC behavior. I spoke this before on a program, and I'll repeat it here. When I was a kid, growing up in Linden, I remember going to line up at the PNC office to buy milk and fish, and there was a guy by the name of Bad Hart that used to be kicking and slapping people, women, pregnant women, men. You got to line up, you got to do as he say at the PNC office in Linden. This is nothing new. The only thing is, between now and then, is that now more of it is being captured on video. When the PNC came out to protest Parliament, when they were debating in Parliament to change the Tamari Airport to Chedijagan International Airport, when I think Janet Jagan was the Prime Minister at that time. I don't remember, but in any case, they were protesting, and we were outside. We walk out of Parliament, and someone slapped me in the face. You know, this is nothing new, but now it's being captured on television. The PNC knows this very well. When Desmond Hoyt in 1992 conceded that the PNC has lost the elections, the PNC people stopped him outside and almost go to beat him up. Winston Murray was attacked. Winston Murray was an executive member of the PNC. He was attacked. Hamilton Green and Desmond Hoyt became enemies because Desmond Hoyt conceded in 1992 that the People's National Congress lost the elections. So this is not no new tactic, and the fix for this election, 2020 election, the fix with GECOM was in a long time ago. It was something that was in the making. Let me just say this. I don't know how no one saw this, but why take an election office into that area where the at the Ashman's building? Ashman's ceased to operate his business in that area because that area is only certain people be in that area. Let me just say this I'm trying to be politically correct here. The money spenders are scared to go into that area. PPP people are not safe in that area. That election office was placed in that area specifically for a reason, so that when these things that are happening now was supposed to happen, the PPP supporters and members would be scared to traverse that area. That is no area for no office to be, especially an office of GECOM. So the fix was in a long time ago. That's why Patterson was unilaterally selected to become the chairman of GECOM, because Patterson, had he been there, he would not have been quiet like Claudette Singh. I don't know whether Claudette Singh is compromised or not, but she has been relatively quiet. But I could guarantee you, if Patterson was there, we would have had a declaration already, and we would have been told to move on. These guys like Patterson and them, you know why Granger is bringing out these old retirees? Because they don't care anything anymore about character and good conduct or anything. They've already lived their life. According to Patterson, he was already an honorable judge. So now he don't even give a damn about character. He would go down dying to protect his party, the People's National Congress. And that's why you have all these retirees in the government now, because they don't care about integrity, they don't care about decency, they don't care about the rule of law. Look at the fixing of the Guyana police force. the assistant, the deputy commissioners, all that was put in place with the intention to set up the country for this point that we are at now. But no one saw it coming.
Absolutely, and I fully agree with everything you just said. Now, here's the thing. Also, keep in mind, Granger is a military person, and many of the people who he put in those key positions are also squaddies, from the military. But I want to go back to something you said, Charles, about Granger supposedly being a person, who's a historian and who should have understood, the history of Guyana and avoid those pitfalls that we try to avoid. Especially those that are connected to the Barnum years. But Granger was actually, he didn't actually learn from history. He learned well of the Barnum tactics, and like I said before, this was a plan that was concocted from way back. This was a plan that was concocted, especially from 2015. As Mr. Rogers was saying, those key elements were put in place for a reason. And it is nothing new when you compare what is happening today to the Barnum era. We talk about the fact that Mr. Hamilton Green, fell out of place. Mr. Hamilton Green was actually one of the people who were in the GECOM office who were protesting against handing over power to the Chetty Jagan government in 1992. And it did take a phone call from President Bush, who made a phone call to Desmond Hoy that said, "Hey, you got to keep your people away and let my citizen go." So these events you're seeing now are nothing new. They were put in place, and this is part of a plan. And Region 4 is actually where it was planned that the rigging would take place. And if they want to do a recount of all the regions, fine. But what you're going to have, as one of the previous speakers said before, is you're going to have a situation where you're going to have, confounded numbers also connected with the other regions, and not just Region 4, because the PNC is continuously intending to create more and more confusion and drag this out. And once those numbers are declared, they will move on to swear in Mr. Granger. Yeah. And that's the plan.
Well, and I listened to you both commentating on the last 50 years of what Guyana went through, and sadly we haven't learned anything. We haven't put any systems in place. Even GECOM itself came under severe criticism by the Carter Center in 1992, and they did nothing with those recommendations. And whether it's the police, whether it's the army, whether it's GECOM, whether it's how we manage our other affairs. We have not learned anything. And I think moving forward, to me personally, we should put this election aside, and we should have some sort of the crux of the matter is that African Guyanese do not have a representative in parliament should APNU lose the election, and vice versa. Indians don't feel that they're represented in parliament if their party, the PPP, loses. So the issue is, at the end of the day, is representation and access to resources and all that kind of stuff. And unless we don't change the rules of the game, we're going to be in this mess forever. Both PPP and APNU have not been able or unwilling or incapable or incompetent when it comes to constitutional reform. That is key. For me personally, as a Guyanese who loves Guyana and will do whatever it takes to change the dynamics, I believe both parties should come together and look at an interim arrangement only to change the Constitution. Just that. And after they would have changed the Constitution after 18 months, go to election again.
And well said, gentlemen. All of you well said. But now things have changed because the ABCE countries made this statement. It says, the Ambassador of the United States of America, Her Excellency Sarah Ann Lynch, the British High Commissioner, His Excellency Greg Quinn, the Canadian High Commissioner, Her Excellency Lillian Chatterjee, and the Ambassador of the European Union, His Excellency Fernando Ponscanto, decided to leave the Region 4 tabulation process this morning, as it was clear that a transparent and credible process was not put in place by the responsible officials. Further, we are concerned about intimidation tactics we observed against those seeking to ensure that a credible process is followed. We must be clear that in the absence of a credible process, as directed by the Honorable Chief Justice, it is our view that any results for Region 4, which will impact the overall results of the March 2nd election, will not be credible, and a president sworn in on the basis of those results will not be considered legitimate. We are all long-standing friends of Guyana whose countries have supported its development over many decades. The betterment of Guyana and its people has always been our interest. In that spirit, we urge all parties to not do anything which could lead Guyana to isolation. And isolation, gentlemen, means that there will be a lot of problems coming to the president, to the ministers of government, if he's sworn in with this kind of arrangement, to GECOM officials, to everyone who has a hand in this nonsense and this fiasco. I think a bad day is coming for them, and we hope that good sense will prevail. We also have a statement from the Organization of American States that they also left this morning. The Organization of American States pulled out of Guyana, saying results unlikely to gain public confidence. The Organization of American States Observer Mission on Friday said it would be pulling out of Guyana because tabulation process for Region 4 is unlikely to produce overall results that are widely accepted. The process employed by the returning officer Region 4 is not transparent, and based on the numbers that have emanated since the process was first disputed, is unlikely to produce a result that is credible and is able to command public confidence, the Observer Mission said in a statement. So all the groups, the international community, all over the world, CARICOM came out strong in this. Everyone is on one side, and President Granger and APNU is on the other side. Gentlemen, what are your thoughts as we close the program tonight?
I think we have a lot of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise in the background.
We have a lot of background noise.
There's a lot of noise in the background, Charles.
Professor,
we hear you loud and clear.
We have a situation like this already with our neighbor Venezuela, where the person who is Mr. Juan Guaido, who is recognized by 50-something countries as the legitimate leader of the Bolivian Republic of Venezuela, is not at the helm, because Nicolas Maduro, a dictator, refused to have free, fair, and credible elections. That is why the ABC countries and those countries that respect democracy recognize Mr. Juan Guaido as the legitimate leader of Venezuela. We could have a situation like that in Guyana. Do we really want our country to be another Venezuela? Only a few days ago, a young man messaged me because he saw my live videos and messaged me. He's in Trinidad. He is actually living like a slave in Trinidad. He's a citizen of Venezuela, but he's scared to go back because he said while he's a slave in Trinidad, he is still better off than living in Venezuela. That is what the Venezuelan citizens are experiencing right now. And that is where Guyana is going to be heading if Mr. Granger, and mind you, it's not just Granger, because I told you about the situation with Desmond Hoyt. It is a set of people operating in Congress Place who wants to control Guyana by any means necessary. So it's not just Granger. Even if Granger get up today and say, listen, we're going to let the process be fair and we're going to let the chips fall where it may, Granger is going to be endangered, not by anybody else, but by the thugs and bullies that operate out of Congress Place. Those are the people that are going to put him in danger. When Desmond Hoyt conceded the elections in 1992, it wasn't members of the public that endangered his life. It was members, PNC supporters. It wasn't when Winston Murray was attacked. It wasn't members of the public or John Public or the PPP or anybody else. It was PNC diehard supporters that attacked Winston Murray. So it is not just Granger. It is the people operating in Congress Place that is calling the shots and pulling it, and they just got to go. And they don't care. They don't care about integrity. They don't care about anything else. All they care about is staying into power. And whatever happens to Guyana once the PNC is in power.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Salim?
Well, for me, and I echo a lot of the sentiments of Ozzy there, but at the end of the day, I believe while these two elephants are busy trying to figure out who won the election, I think Guyana is at a standstill. And sadly, I think the entire country is retrogressing. We're going backward, as it relates to so many things. One area of very, very concern to me is the economy itself. Where is our economy going? I know APNU sadly placed all their eggs in the oil basket, and we know now oil has tanked, $35 per barrel. That's not going to help the Guyana economy. The election and its aftermath is hurting Guyana badly. I would like to see, and I would like to call on APNU and the PPP. Either of them are going to win this election. Someone is going to be sworn in very soon. I would like to see some tax relief measures put in place for businesses and individuals who depend on the economy. All of us do, but some of us are directly involved. All the retailers, all the taxi drivers, all the restaurants and hotels, they're all being hurt right now. They still have bills to pay, and they are paying their bills. They have taxes to pay, and they're going to be paying their taxes. I would love to see the PPP or APNU have a tax relief, a financial relief package ready when they're sworn in for the business community. It's unfair that this fight is taking place and is hurting the common average Guyanese who's trying their best to make Guyana a better place. So for me, I believe that one of these guys is going to be sworn in. Sadly, it's going to be in a very messy way, and the world is seeing sort of like the 101 of rigging. This is how you rig it. Kind of in public. So I'm praying and hoping for peace and stability in Guyana. Whichever government wins, I think it's going to be a tough one for them to govern for 5 years. I see their whichever one wins, they're probably going to go down in 2.5 to 3 years, which is probably good for Guyana anyway. And to me, at the end of it all, when I look back at the last 10 years, and when I saw the PPP loss in 2015, and now that I'm experiencing a loss by APNU that they're unwilling to accept, what I think they should have learned, and what I think Guyanese have learned, is that if you don't perform, you're going to be voted out. PPP did not do its best in 2015. PPP was mired in corruption and other excesses, and they were voted out in 2015. This election, APNU grossly underperformed, especially within their constituents, and they were voted out. So I think next election, whoever wins this election here, the next election they're on. They got to play big defense, because Guyanese voters are going to be voting someone out who's not performing well. So performance is a key factor for any government that's going to take the reins over the next few years.
Thank you, Salim. Dr. Ramarat, closing remarks.
I'm sorry, I got disconnected for a minute or so I missed part of what was said. But there's a couple of things I'd like to point out. One, I don't know how Salim's Change Guyana did, but my hope here before the election was that the small parties, which I call mini parties, would have garnered enough of seats, right? I didn't expect a lot, but maybe a few to hold some kind of bargaining power in the legislative branch, right? Assuming that one of the two parties win the plurality and control the executive. So that was my hope. I think right now the focus ought to be in how do we bring Guyana together, but this process is going to be drawn out, and my fear is that the coalition will install itself amid the protests of many Guyanese, and they will form that next government, because I'm judging this based on what has transpired, not just within the last week or so. but since 2015. So, and the other point I want to make is that ethnicity is what Guyana's politics is all about. And obviously, constitutional change is important. But I think constitutional change will take its course. That's going to be a much more drawn out process. But ethnicity is important in a sense here also, because if we look at the Amerindian community, if we assume, and of course I'm assuming because we don't have the actual vote, and I do believe that Mr. Schuman did say that he is going to be cheated if the verification process that is controlled by GECOM goes through. He's going to be cheated of a seat. I appreciate the fact that Mr. Schuman can mobilize the Amerindian community, and hopefully, if Mr. Schuman represents, the Amerindians, you have one political party representing primarily Indians, one representing primarily Africans. Maybe that can be the basis. That can be the basis of a window of opportunity for political leaders to come together and say, hey, maybe we ought to have programs like an ethnic impact statement, right, to assess policies and see which group is benefiting and which group is not. Maybe we can have transformative politics where we can try to, create institutions like the armed force, bureaucracy, organizations that reflect the demographics of the Guyanese people. So that is my hope, but my hope has to be placed on hold for now, because we are now in a deep hole, and I am not seeing a way where this or whatever comes out of this is going to be good for Guyana. If this election is being stolen, whether it's the PNC or the PPP wins, but if it's stolen, it means that we're going to be faced with sanctions. It means we're not going to be able to live the so-called good life that people talk about, and we're going to be in dire straits. And it will be a shame because, as most people would say, Guyana has the potential to become the Dubai of the Caribbean. So we have to wait and see.
Thank you very much. And guys, in closing, I want to speak to the President and the opposition leader. Mr. President, you're a historian. In 1968, the Johnson administration of the United States supported Forbes Barnum when he had the overseas vote on the padded list, because they didn't want Chetty Jagan to be the leader of the country at that time. The world has changed, Mr. President. Today, if you go ahead with what is going on, what GECOM is doing now, there will be, as Dr. Beteram said, massive sanction on Guyana. The oil revenues that you're expected to receive, that will be put in an escrow account and will stay here in the United States. You will not be able to use those money. Visas will be revoked. Your visa, Mr. President, will be revoked. Madam Chairman, your visa is like to be revoked as well. So the time has changed. The world has changed. And the world will not sit back idle and see Guyana go down this path. The question is, where do we go from here? Another program we'll have to discuss in details what we can do. But I'm calling on Mr. Ali, Mr. Granger, sit down. Plan a path forward for Guyana. This is a political problem, and it needs a political solution. The courts can do what they want. The court will do everything they can. And thank God for the Chief Justice. She has really upheld high the laws of Guyana. But this is a political problem. The problem, as Ossie said, is that if Mr. Granger has now acknowledged that they lost the election, his supporters will not be nice to him, and that's a fact. We have seen that in '92. We have seen it on, and I'm not saying it's the DNA of the PNC. A lot of the PNC people are decent people. There's a few, of course, the diehard who want to create mayhem. And I'm calling on you, President Granger, Dr. Ali, sit at the table, negotiate. Let us work this out together. So at the end of the day, it's not who win or who lose, but Guyana can move forward. We say the pledge, I pledge myself to honor always the flag of Guyana and to be loyal to my country, to be obedient to the laws of Guyana, and to love my fellow citizens towards the happiness and prosperity of Guyana. Can we not live that at least for now and make that part of our ideal, that together we can build Guyana, but divided, it will fail. So my appeal to you, gentlemen, please put Guyana first. Put aside this greed and this lust for power. Power is only a fleeting moment. One moment we have the power and the next moment is gone. We have seen it in history. We have seen it all over the world. Powerful leaders, they are now lying in the grave. And there's a beautiful stanza I learned in school. The boast of heraldry, the pomp of power, and all that beauty, all that wealth they give, await alike the inevitable hour. The path of glory leads but to the grave. One day we leave all this power we are fighting for, all this animosity against each other. We will leave it one day, as we all will go to that one place, to the grave. My plea to the people of Guyana, work together. Be your brother's keeper. To the leaders, please help us to be that keeper for each other. Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for tonight, and we look forward for another program when we can find solutions to help our leaders so that Guyana at the end will be the winner. Here from New York, I know Salim is in Florida. Mr. Rogers, are you in New York or are you in Guyana?
I'm in Pennsylvania.
You're in Pennsylvania, and Dr. Rambrock is in Long Island. So all of us is outside of Guyana. But our heart bleeds for Guyana, and we look forward tomorrow as we wake up. As the sun rises tomorrow in the east, we will have the good news that GECOM has done the right thing and verify the result of Region 4 by the statement of polls. That whoever wins that election, based on that, will carry us through, as Salim said, hopefully for the next 5 years. But together, we can build our country. I want to thank Nohar Singh and to Devin, our specialist here in New York. To all our viewers, we want to thank you so much for being with us. And we look forward to see you again in the near future. Yes, Sally, you want to say something?
Well, I just wanted to mention that I'm wishing everyone to stay safe and healthy in this environment of the coronavirus. Trump, of course, has declared a national state of emergency, which carries tremendous amount of measures. Schools are closed, colleges are closed, NBA season has been canceled, NCAA, there's no March Madness this year, so America is taking it very seriously, and I would implore, of course, our Guyanese leaders to take steps to ensure that Guyanese citizens and communities are safe from this virus and whatever it entails. But yeah, I wish all viewers and their families safe from the coronavirus. Take heed of all the advices that has been circling around on social media and by the news and so on.
I'll echo the same sentiments. My school was actually closed today for deep cleaning. But Charles, I think you will make a good mediator in Guyana.
And we are, our school, our college is also closed. We are now going online for the rest of the semester. So all our lectures will be online. The good thing about America, they have taken it so seriously. And the president shows leadership today when he brought out all the private sector that is important for this virus. And he put all on board together. And yeah, he'll be tested soon. But the thing is, it's important that Guyanese, do the hygienic thing. Wash your hands. Try not to shake someone's hand. Do the elbow as it's told to be done. So together we can save ourselves from this virus. And
can I add my little piece too?
Yes, Ossie.
All right. So, you know what? The coronavirus in Guyana, and I'm not downplaying it, is very serious. But so far, only one person, it is said, it's alleged that one person died from the coronavirus. The virus of violence that perpetrates from Congress Place is worse. A lot of people died from that in the years and years of Guyana being an independent country. We have to also protect ourselves from that virus that every election's time seek to divide our people and harm our people. Once we could protect ourselves from that, once our leaders see that that is also important to protect every single Guyanese, regardless of your skin color, then is when we can move forward. And I want all Guyanese to remember that and let us stay safe and put Guyana first. If we put Guyana first, Guyana will win.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure.
To PNC supporters, that would not be a fair statement for PNC supporters. So I don't embrace that totally. I don't believe PNC is a virus. Just like I don't believe any party in Guyana is a virus. So
I never said PNC is a virus, my brother. I said the violence that comes out of it.
Every party has their strength. It is their inability to cooperate and to collaborate and for a better Guyana.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. And we pray that God will bless Guyana and bless all his people. Thank you so much again from New York.
Good night, gentlemen.
Thank you.